This podcast was recorded on Ghana land. Hey, Stephen.
Yes, Olivia.
What do today's stories and my face have in common?
Oh, they're both here to brighten up your Monday morning.
Aw, that's nice. I was going to say they're both showstoppers.
Ho, roll the intro.
We need to be sharing ideas and data and helping each other out.
I'm going to take this information into the office and tease every single person to assert my dominance.
Yeah, that's nightmare fuel.
They're almost like the science version of a crystal ball.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing this for my children. 7,800 years old.
Hello and welcome to Off Embargo, a podcast by the Australian Science Media Centre. I'm Olivia Henry.
And I'm Stephen Mew. And on today's show, we are talking about two stories, contraceptives and brain tumour risk, and microplastics and heart attacks. And these sound like pretty big, scary stories.
Yeah.
But the media coverage we got was not great.
But that's not always a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, I mean, sounds counterintuitive, but actually we're not unhappy about that.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of reasons for this. And one of them is that if you think of these two stories, they're both on face value, they could be big, scary, clickbaity headlines. But sometimes that's not what you want.
Yeah, you want to inject some science in there to maybe temper the headlines and make sure that people get the right information and not something that's overhyped or overplayed.
We spoke to some independent experts about this, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But if they did come back and say, you know what, actually this is scary and we should be super, super worried, we would have gone with that.
Yeah, well, we're not here to cover it up.
Yeah.
We're just looking to see what the experts actually think about them because we thought they were potentially big and scary.
Yeah. And we want to know, should we be big and scared? And in some cases, yes, some cases, no. So, I mean, maybe we should just get into it. Can I tell you a little bit about the one that I covered earlier this week?
Yeah, tell me about it.
So this story is about hormonal contraceptives, and these ones are containing something called progestogens. And what this study found was that these progestogens might slightly increase the risk of developing a common type of brain tumour.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so that's scary already, right?
A lot of people are taking contraceptives.
Yes. Yeah, and not always for trying to stop a baby. So for someone like me, for example, I have endometriosis, so I've been on them for years and years and years. And so I'm always glued to these stories because, especially with women's health, often you're not getting the medical advice that you're looking for, or, you know, you can't find a doctor who will help you. So you do a lot of turning to Google. And so a story like this immediately becomes this whole like, oh my God, if I'm not trained in science or if I'm not trained in kind of reading research in the right way, I'm going to see a story like this and go, holy crap, I'm going to get a brain tumor.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not what we want.
Exactly.
We don't want anyone to get brain tumors, but we also don't want to freak people out.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? It's not saying, don't worry about this.
Yeah.
Like, what we're trying to do here is kind of look at it like, okay, what are the actual things to worry about? So this study was looking at the use of contraceptives and the risk of brain tumour in 3 million Danish women.
It's quite a big study.
It is quite a big study.
Which is always a big tick at the start. If you're looking at a study, you go, how many people were actually involved in this?
Exactly.
Because if it's 5, the findings maybe not quite so accurate. But if it's 3 million, that's
something to look at.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so in this study, 3 million Danish women, and of these women, 1,473 were diagnosed with this brain tumor called meningioma. And if you don't know, meningioma is the most common type of brain tumor. So while a vast majority of them are non-cancerous, so sometimes it's a tumor without actually having cancer, it's like a growth more than anything, because it's growing inside the skull, it's still going to cause problems. You're still going to get things like headaches, seizures, vision changes, memory issues, all of these things that you don't want.
Yeah.
And we're not dialing back the seriousness of meningiomas. But at the same time, it is a very common and treatable type of brain tumor. So they were looking at this risk, and they found the risk was highest among women using this injectable contraceptive called medroxyprogesterone. There are also smaller increases seen for contraceptive pills and high-dose hormonal IUDs. So all of these are contraceptives that women are using at the moment. So they also found that the risk was greatest while they were using the contraceptives, and then generally returned to normal about 5 years after stopping. So that is kind of indicative that there is a slightly higher risk here. So something to look at, right?
Yeah. And you can already see where the headlines would go based on that. Contraceptives cause, you to have more brain tumours, so maybe stop.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are a woman that is looking up these kind of women's health issues, there are a lot of kind of negative effects of taking these things, and everyone's quite different. And so when you are looking up, what's the best for me, you're often seeing this kind of reporting back of women saying, well, I had this and I had this and I had this, so maybe don't take it, maybe, and you don't want that. What you want is medical advice that is specific to you.
Yeah. And it's also important to note that as well, if you do see these kinds of things, always talk to your doctor if you're concerned about something. That should always be your sort of first port of call. I know, like you said, you do need to rely quite often on sort of the things you find on Google, but if you see something that you're concerned about, you should talk to your doctor first.
Absolutely. And this is kind of where this study isn't very helpful, because at the end of the day, we're looking at this and we are seeing an increased risk. But we spoke to some experts about this to say, okay, how big is this problem? And it was really interesting what they were saying. So they were actually saying that, okay, yes, this is an issue, but the chance of dying from a meningioma is actually less than 1 in 500,000. So even if you do have it, the risk is very, 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 very low. And the risk of getting this meningioma is still low. And then the risk of dying from it is also low. To put this in perspective, the chance of dying on our roads is about 1 in 20,000. And another expert was saying that the chance of actually having complications during pregnancy that lead to a death is 6.6 per 100,000. So that's much
a lot more.
Yeah, that's a lot more. And it's not saying definitely take contraceptives, don't get pregnant. But it's kind of all putting these risks into perspective. And it kind of shows that doctors need to know about this, because if you are treating a patient who suddenly gets headaches or suddenly gets vision changes and she's on these contraceptives, maybe it's something to look into. But as someone taking these contraceptives, these risks aren't high enough to panic and stop taking it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Important to be aware, perhaps, but not something to immediately tell you to stop using them.
Yes.
Which is potentially where the headline would go.
Exactly. So it's definitely that be alert but not alarmed kind of situation. You want people to know that this risk exists so that they can keep an eye out for these issues. But at the same time, you don't want people to panic and stop seeking the medical help that they need, and reducing the pain, reducing the risk of unwanted pregnancy, reducing all of these things because of something that is so rare that you may not even know someone in your lifetime who has one.
Yeah, so this is where we sort of have the peek behind the curtain for what we do. We had a story that we thought was very interesting and important for people to know about, and we wanted to get the opinions of Australian experts on if it really was, a big scary story or not. And they came back and sort of said, I mean, it is an important finding, but in context, people probably don't need to panic.
Yes, exactly.
So we distributed those comments alongside the media release for this paper and sent that out to journalists so they could report on the story. And what did we find with the coverage after that went out? Did we get a lot of clickbaity headlines and journalists reporting widely on it, or what happened?
Well, what happened was we barely saw any coverage, which was quite surprising to me, actually. I thought we would see something, but we maybe got about 7 stories, and those 7 stories did quote our experts. So I think what these quotes did was it took it from a story that could have been everyone, contraceptives are causing brain tumours, everyone stop taking them, to hello, here is a risk. Please be aware of this risk. Speak to your doctor if you have any issues. But other than that, still safe, please carry on with your day.
And we call that a showstopper.
We call that a showstopper. That's right. Our colleagues in Germany, when they came to visit us, told us that they call it showstoppers, which I quite like.
Yeah, so that's where there's a story that potentially could blow out of proportion. And when we then get comments that sort of suggest it's not that big, the story gets exactly the amount of coverage that it should.
Exactly, yeah. Not much coverage, and when they do, they put the time into it to get it right.
Yeah, and we would normally, distribute that either way, whether the experts came back to us and said, this is a big problem, everyone should be worried, or whether they said, like they did, that it's not quite as big of a deal as you might first seem. Either way, we'd send that out, but in this case, it was a bit of a showstopper instead of a show starter.
Exactly. It gave me a sigh of relief anyway. Moving on from that a little bit, we've got another story that at the time of recording anyway, just recently come out. Do you want to tell me a little bit about it? Because I'm not across this one as much.
We've actually had another one come out which we think might do the same thing. but we're not sure yet. We're still waiting for that coverage to come in. And this is just a small study of only 61 people, but it found that those people who had suffered a serious heart attack had higher levels of microplastics and nanoplastics in their blood compared to people who hadn't had a heart attack or had normal blood vessels.
And that's another scary one because, I mean, microplastics, if you're a person who is concerned about plastics and you don't use plastics, then microplastics being in your blood, you can't really avoid that, you know? It's really hard to avoid the environmental pollution that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, unless you live in a non-plastic bubble, you're going to find those plastics getting to you regardless of what you do. They're in the air, they're in air pollution. They can end up in food, they can end up everywhere. So in this study, they found that a particular type of plastic, which is common in plastic packaging, which is called polyethylene, was one of the ones that was found in greater quantities in people's blood. And again, we went out to experts on this one and we said, hey, this seems pretty alarming. You know, it seems like an important study. What do you think about the research? Now, we did get quite a few replies on this, and a lot of the experts did say, hey, microplastics are a big problem. We really need to be doing more to both study the effects of microplastics on people and also to try and find ways to reduce the exposure that people are getting. But a few of the experts also said, well, yeah, these findings are important, but due to the type of study that this is, which is an observational study, so it can't show necessarily that one thing, microplastics, are causing another thing, heart
just
attacks.
That they're both happening at the same time, right?
There seems to be a higher percentage of plastics or microplastics found in people's blood who also had heart attacks. So these two things are linked, but the study itself can't show that they are causing. One thing is causing the other.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ones that comes up quite often with these kinds of studies where it's something that sounds really alarming, but the study can't actually show the cause. It can only show a link.
A link, yes.
And that can be quite difficult to report on. So that's one of the reasons why we do these expert reactions when we see this sort of story. We ask experts to give us the context and the extra information that tells us a little bit more about that, you know, if it's a big problem or not.
Yeah. It's the classic, if you're a science person, the correlation does not equal causation. Like just because two things are happening at the same time doesn't mean one is causing the other. Yeah.
Just because there were more people eating cheese when Napoleon Bonaparte died, it doesn't mean that he was killed by cheese.
It's big cheese. Message from Big Cheese.
The other thing that experts said to us is, well, actually, one of the methods that they use to determine, you know, if these people had these microplastics in their blood is actually not a very good method for detecting those plastics. The way that this study actually looked for these plastics was using a device which sort of, you take a blood sample and you analyze it and it tells you what's in there. But there's been quite a lot of evidence that those machines can't tell the difference between those nanoplastics and these things which are called lipids, which are fats in your blood, which are just produced naturally by your body. It confuses that with plastic, and especially polyethylene, which is the one that's in plastic packaging, has a really hard time picking that one from just normal fats in our blood. So as a result of that, this study can't necessarily say actually that that's what they found or not. It might have just been that there's more fats in people's blood.
Yeah, and one of the experts had a really good quote, didn't they, about what the top line could have been. What was that again?
The headline could just as well read, patients who suffer heart attacks have more lipids in their blood.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things where this study itself isn't bad. Like neither of these studies are bad per se, but knowing this context is really important, and it's so hard to get across in a headline.
As a journalist, when you read especially the media release and even the paper, if you're not a trained scientist, looking at some of the things that they're talking about, it's really hard to determine, sometimes even what type of study it is. And again, that testing method, I don't know if that's a good way to detect plastics in people's blood.
Exactly. We're very generalist here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A journalist in general isn't going to know that either. But these experts do, and that's what they told us. So we've sent that one out to journalists as well, and the initial indication from the media coverage that we've seen is that it also hasn't been widely covered. and certainly not with the clickbaity headlines. So in the early days, so we're still sort of keeping an eye on that one, but it's a similar situation where we think maybe this is a bit of a showstopper.
Yeah, and it's interesting because both of these studies are very interesting to the scientific community, and they're both pertaining to our health in a way that will still need to be investigated. But for us now and what we need to do now as individuals, not that much. We'll leave it to the scientists for now.
We need more research before we can decide if this needs to be something that we should panic about.
Exactly.
Both of these studies, they are important, and we would send out whatever the experts told us about them, whether it was alarm or not alarm. But in this case, most of the coverage is to sort of say, well, important but not alarm.
And that's all we've got time for today, so thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to hear more about us and what we do, you can visit smc.org.au.
And if you love what we do and you want to support us, you can follow the donate link to make a tax-deductible donation. This helps us keep supporting journalists to accurately report science, and it will help us keep making podcasts too.
And if you're a journalist or researcher who would like to work with us, or if you just want to read some interesting science stories like the two we spoke about today, visit our news portal, SCIMEX.org. We'll be back in a few weeks with another episode. Until then, catch you next time.
See ya.
Off Embargo is a podcast by the Australian Science Media Centre.
It's written, hosted and produced by Stephen New and Olivia Henry.
Our theme music is by Adelaide artist and producer Nathan Huai.
And our editing is by Stephanie Heffron.
This podcast was made possible by a science engagement grant from Inspiring South Australia.
And a special thank you goes to Justin MacArthur and the Peasinner Network.